Hello there, this is Steve here in Sydney of the lay gnosis website truebluehealer.com, where you can get physical evidence of the activation of your divine spark, which will explain to you what the great religions have been doing. The massive snow job being done on you for several thousand years by the church. All the churches, all the great religions. You can bypass it all, you never needed them. And they've spent a couple of thousand years preventing you from finding this out. And today we are suffering because people don't know what they really are. And you can find that out in 20 minutes at truebluehealer.com. You do the beginner's tour. You'll get physical evidence, and later on you'll get another type of physical evidence, as well as an internal mentoring voice. It's a wonderful experience. It's literally a sleigh ride through a magic forest. Okay, I commend it to you. If more people were awake, we'd have a lot less psychopathic behaviour in this world today, and that's what I'm going to talk about right now. There's a lot of news breaking now about Orlando. It's reported, people are coming forward, that he was texting another homosexual male for some 12 months before this event happened. And what was his name, Manteel or something, Mateen, he was, he used to frequent this nightclub and get drunk. So we've got to ask the question, is he a closet gay or something anyway? Surprise, 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 eh? I mean, he could have scouted Disneyland and decided, oh, there's not enough gays, you know. I don't know what his planning method was. As an aside and a further unravelling of Islam, can I just tell you that devout Muslims see your dead body as a stepping stone to the paradise with 72 virgins, which are re-virginised overnight for their permanent erections when they wake up in the morning, okay? That's the Muslim understanding of heaven. Now, if you read more, you will find in the same book that if you get to heaven and you're a jihadi and you've done all the things you have to do, you've killed a lot of unbelievers, and you don't like girls, there's hundreds of young boys available provided by the great Allah who forbade homosexuality in the physical plane back on earth. Can you believe that? That's true, I kid you not. I think I'll find the reference for you. Many hundreds of boys are made available to people who don't like girls in heaven by the great Allah. It's outrageous, isn't it? What kind of a self-refuting religion is this? I'm just wondering how long it will take all the left-wing loonies, the incredibly gullible people who go to university and believe everything they're told by people with initials after their name, that they should go out and make war against our own white society because it's totally evil, because you can strand people into different victim groups to take advantage of them politically to attack the majority, the great white silent majority. You can do all those sorts of things, but by joining up with these groups, you run around poncing around in a rainbow coloured shirt. You may as well put a target on your back saying AK-47, shoot here. So effectively the Jewish lobby is turning gullible young white people into cannon fodder, and they do delight in this on Twitter. Jewish people are cheering the massacre of white people. So I don't know if gullible people who've been to academia and are professional protesters can actually join that many thoughts together in one go. I'm not sure. I have severe doubts because left-wing people practice the most denialism of anybody, and they live in a fairyland of what things should be rather than what they really are, constantly looking to a kind of virtual existence they would love to have, some kind of utopia which couldn't exist practically, generated by their own young, immature minds. But they want to live in this fairyland and project it onto everybody else that we should all love each other and sing Kumbaya. And that will get you likely in the future, certainly in the United States, probably an AK-47 bullet in your back. You keep wearing these rainbow-coloured shirts and things and proclaiming your gayness. And this brings us to what I've already talked about, which is New causes of death have to be generated for our death certificates to encompass militant Islam. So now we've got, as well as gay people have 400% more depression, 20 times more likely to be arrested for drug offences, and transgender people have a 2,000% higher chance of committing suicide, which is why transgenderism surgery was stopped at Johns Hopkins University, because now they've decided it's a mental disease that can't be remedied with any kind of physical surgery. It's a mental illness just like anorexia, people who think they're too fat or too small or too big or too weak or something. It's a mental illness of self-perception. And it can't be corrected with surgery. So, meanwhile, we are told transgender surgery is taking off all over the world. It's in the news nearly every day, and it seems to be sustained by just capitalism. It's a lot of money. People make a lot of money out of doing this. So this is another example where commercialism keeps something going that's bad, actually, and bad for society, bad for the individual, but commercialism keeps a lot of things going too, like Christmas and Easter and lots of other sort of stuff. So we just have to endure a lot of the stupid things, say, here in Australia, they keep trying to bring in the American, Halloween thing. And it doesn't get much support here. We have no interest in it. And it just won't take off here. But every year, shopkeepers try to introduce it with TV advertising campaigns, and it just doesn't gain hold. So that's one thing that commercialism can't stimulate into becoming mainstream, and thus another source of revenue. An interesting thing about Islam is that there's no concept of the state in the Quran or any of the holy writings, that certain people should take responsibilities for things which are completely non-religious. And so that there's some kind of official high quality, best quality response to a given requirement of a society that's got no religious affiliations. It doesn't seem to happen at all. It doesn't occur anywhere inside Islam. So there's as far as I can tell, there seems to be there's no direction that roads have to be built to a certain standard. Schools have got to be made. Even weapons have got to be made to certain standards. I mean, there's none of that in the Islamic book, you see, the theocracy. So we have theocrats who don't know a thing, and most of them can't read, trying to run societies thinking all they need is this one crackpot book written by a 7th century warlord. Now, can I contrast that with something else? French-speaking Vikings invaded England in 1066 and introduced harsh, cruel Norman law, where violence was the ultimate authority. It always is, and I think you need to realise that. That's why English laws are still written in French, to this very day. Did you know that? The final argument about the meaning of a law is found in the French language. So that's how long-lasting the Norman contribution to British history has been. Now, the rule of law is something that we all seem to need and all seem to want. So for that reason, we have people like you see in the popular Robin Hood show. You have the Sheriff of Nottingham, right? Basically, he was a tax collector. He had bailiffs. They're all French words, by the way. Bailiff is a French word. And that was to make the economy work properly, okay? The Roman Empire was founded on putting business and commercialism above everything else because it was discovered, it was noticed that it raised everybody's living standard. And criminal law came second to commercial law. Commercial law enabled a massively expanding economy to bring consumer items to the rest of the empire and actually Romanized other people. This was very well understood by Romans. Okay, now the Normans did the same thing, and they had a very rigorous system of laws put in place. so that the economy was strictly regulated, and if you owed money, you had to pay it back one way or the other. Back in Roman times, if you didn't pay your debts, the other person you owed money to was allowed to cut a part of your body off. So that was done to encourage people paying their debts. That's how important Romans thought debt collection was, and similarly the Normans. Now the other thing was, being as the debt collector was affiliated with the local sheriff or the local prince, affiliated with the government, then it was also decided that justice would be meted out according to national laws coming down from the top of the monarchy, you see. And the surprising result being that murder wasn't actually a crime till about the 16th century in England. Did you know that? And before that, if one of your family was murdered, it was the onus was on the family to avenge the murder of their relative, you see. So surprisingly, murder was okay up till about 1600 in England. And in Roman times, murder was fine. You could do it. Remember, they used to kill each other for entertainment, like football matches. And the only kind of killing you could not do in Roman times was poisoning. That was considered so dastardly and so nefarious that did bring a death sentence. Okay? So the Romans were strange people. They had a great reverence for dead people. It was illegal to do autopsies on dead bodies, but you could kill as many people as you like to make them dead, so that whoever you hated, you immediately revered when they were dead. So they're very strange people were the Romans with their kind of death cult mentality, yet absolute reverence for deceased bodies, and giving a good resting place for heroes of the Roman legions, great officers that had fought great battles and that sort of thing. So very strange death cult were they. So now contrast the rule of law that the Normans put in place in Britain, that the Romans had and built the biggest empire the world has ever known. Contrast that with Islam that has no rule of law coming down from the monarchy. So what you have in Islam is that you see someone doing something wrong, you're allowed to kill them with a rock on the spot. You can mete out, you personally, anybody, any Joe Blow can just mete out justice on the spot because you thought you caught someone doing something. The idea that the average citizen may not be well qualified to mete out justice and not even may be able to perceive justice, understand what justice is, because most of the population can't read and write. Where would they learn justice from? And, you know, the problems of hearsay, she said, they said, that sort of thing, and I thought I overheard you saying this, you've got to be stoned to death, that sort of thing. That's okay in Islam, and it happens today in Pakistan and Afghanistan, still. That's why we have the rule of law, where you actually have advocates speaking for people who have been charged with something. Is it really true, or is it just vicious lies, rumours, hearsay, evidence that can't be traced to anything? Do you need evidence for the trial? Did this thing really happen? Islam has never got that far. Islam has never got that far. It's still in the 7th century. So can you see how people can get away with lying and lying and lying, getting further away from reality and believing their own lies, so they become seriously ungrounded? So now Donald Trump has finally bullied Hillary Clinton into mentioning the phrase that she's never uttered, radical Islam is connected to terrorism. She said words to that effect. And Obama is muttering and stuttering, doesn't know how to make a speech about murderous Islam. He won't be able to do it. He's been challenged. Can he do it before he leaves office, or he should resign? There's still heaps of intellectuals, pseudo-intellectuals in the news saying there's no connection between this crime and Islam, and I think it just takes a few more massacres. That becomes the authority that overrides all theories and opinions, okay? The ultimate authority is violence, and I'm thinking that the left-wing people might have some of their thinking reset by repeated acts of violence of this nature. I only wish people could join the dots far enough to realise that what's painting the targets on LGBT people to get them shot is basically Jewish agitators, Jewish activists, Jewish infiltrators who began their game about 100 years ago into cultural Marxism out of the Franklin Institute. But there seems to be a reluctance to ever question one's own original motivations in all these left-wing people, and so maybe this shooting's doing us a favour. It's going to make left-wing people think a bit and start trying to connect dots. I don't have great faith in a single event like this. I think we need a few more. And I'm wondering whether they can ever get down to, in Florida, Boca Raton, where there's a whole lot of Jewish people there, and retired Russian gangsters and all sorts of wonderful people that you could go after if you don't like the Western world. So it's got to be a repeated message, I think, because these people have suffered from years and years of academic brainwashing. Their whole life they've been spent practicing social justice, making war on the great majority of white people who gave them the universities that they attend. Now, I've just mentioned these people so heavily invested in propaganda begin to believe it and often get seriously ungrounded, and they're living in an internal world of fairy tale nonsense that they're trying to blame everybody else for not implementing. It's the oppressive majority's fault for not implementing the fairy tale in the left-winger's head. The truth is the left-winger's fairy tale in the head is totally impractical and can never be. It's a dystopia, not a utopia. And so what does that actually mean in the terms of a person? Well, it means a considerable lack of self-knowledge associated with immaturity. Now, a quicker way to grow up and to have a lot more self-knowledge is layman's gnosis at truebluehealer.com. It teaches you a lot more about yourself, and all kinds of stresses and mistakes can literally be healed in you in surprising ways that I'd like you to learn about yourself by being surprised. But if people weren't so ignorant about themselves and what they really are, didn't fall for all this materialist tripe they're filled with, all this atheist tripe, we would have a much happier world. But because we've had our natural religious tendencies crushed by 2,000 years of churchdom and 500 years of self-worship in the form of humanism, we're in a pretty sorry state, aren't we? Okay, so you can go to 20 minutes, you can start this process. It's a very slow drip feed, and it doesn't interfere with your daily activities such as going to work and play, whatever you do. You can still do all those things. So there's no great inrush of vast knowledge. It's a very gentle, kind drip feed of pure affection into your personal life, and it comes in the form of vivid messaging dreams, ultimately a mentoring voice, and physical signals to back up the fact, to prove to you that it is not just your imagination. Okay? So, I'm not finished with this Orlando thing yet. The Orlando thing has proven that America might be the zenith of the Muslim invasion of America, because the peculiar societal setup they have, where you can get a military assault rifle at a gun show without showing any identification. There's a loophole in the regulations which can't be closed for some legal reason, and therefore virtually anyone can get a military assault rifle for a few $100s, and they don't need ID, they don't know you've got the gun. So it is truly amazing that continues. But for that reason, for that loophole, it could be a bonus that more of these types of attacks will occur. And that's going to have an impact. I keep saying this and realise, and this is why I say violence seems the only answer to all this, dare I say, bullshit theorising and waffling on by Jewish-inspired intellectuals who get so far away from the ground they're literally talking fairyland. where they invert the perpetrator and the victim in most of their arguments and say that Cologne women were asking to be raped by not being properly covered up and that sort of thing. That nonsense has to stop. And it seems to me that no amount of debate and discussion will stop that fairy tale thinking. I think violence is necessary, and Orlando is proving it, because already gay groups are talking about pulling their heads in a bit and getting closer to the mainstream again, maybe for a bit of cover. Maybe you shouldn't be quite so overt as you thought you could be. That's a serious lesson. I think we're going to need a lot more lessons like this, and I think I've said it before. America's the place because it's got a massive population of guns there, and people who like using them. Further to migration, whether it should continue into the Western world the way it has, have you noticed, and we have the same problem in Australia, that the parents who want a better life and come to the Western world are okay, but their children born in the new country grow up, become jihadis, because they don't make good enough migrant material. They can't grow up and blend into a new society. They're not malleable enough to be migrant material themselves. And I just saw a video about Holland has been ruined by people from all over the world who have taken over Holland, and they're covering it just with enclaves of people who can't even learn the language of Holland. It's been made a legal requirement now. You've got to be able to speak Dutch in Holland, for example. And without being legally compelled, a lot of the migrants don't bother. They just keep speaking their native language and live in two suburbs with shops and schools and living quarters as they need them. So they're not really proper migrants to Holland. And it's destroying the European way of life. Language is one of the great unifying things of a nation. And language has great value. We should realise that. Why don't we all want to speak ancient Arabic? I don't think anybody wants to do that.